as I recall, the story started out with a situation, and that was kind of a love triangle. A woman on vacation, and she meets a handsome stranger. And so I think really for the process of this, for any love triangle story to work well dramatically, right? Because there are millions of them out there, and a lot of them are kind of the same thing over and over. So for it to work well dramatically, you have to allow the characters to be real people, right? You don't want them to be the stereotypical man in a love triangle, woman in a love triangle trope. You want them to be a real person. You want them to have unique feelings, unique desires, and kind of to each be marching to the beat of their own drum. So to do that, we just have to think about what have been the experiences between this couple prior to where they are now. What is their history together? What is the background of this woman who has to choose between these two men or decide what she wants? And so basically the process was getting to know the characters well enough that they had the room to be themselves. So it's more about listening to the character than trying to insert what you as a writer may want to project into the story. Because if you insert what you want, the story is going to be contrived and tropey and flat. But if you listen to the character and you take their background or their likes, their dislikes, things like that into account, then the character starts to shape the story instead of the writer. And that's where you get a more dynamic, a less stereotypical story.
Te quiero.
For me personally, I don't really have one set definition of love. I think that love is many different things to different people. I think that even if you take two people and set them in a room and they think that they agree on one definition of love, they don't necessarily truly agree, right? There are things about it that can't be expressed, and there's so many different types of love between different types of people. For me, most of what I was trying to do in the creation of this story was not project my own ideas about love into the story. So I was really looking for being able to allow the character to form her own ideas about love, and I think that was part of her journey. A big part of what she had to do in the story was to decide what love was, what it meant to her, how she felt about different people, how she wanted those feelings reciprocated. And I think a lot of her journey was ultimately deciding what is love. Is love what I already have? Is this not love? Do I need to find it? Have I found it? Do I still have no idea? And I think that allowing the character to ask those questions as the writer, rather than just answering them or forcing my own opinions into the story, really allowed the story to be more organic and allowed the story to feel more real than if I were to take one definition and say, okay, this is it, and my character must believe in my definition of love. I think that would have kind of destroyed the story in one sense. I think that would have made it much more flat and wouldn't have allowed the characters to have the breathing room they needed for the story to unfold.
Susana, hazme un favor. Si no lo hace, hazlo tú.
I think as a writer, it's always a little bit surreal to see something that you've written acted out by real people. And I think that for me, it was even more surreal because I wrote it in Miami. It was shot in Spain. You know, I wasn't there when it was shot. So for me, it was almost like seeing a completely new story, right? I had to imagine the setting and all of these things when I was writing it, and to see that made real was very, very cool. I think that, you know, seeing people act out these roles that have just been in my head for such a long time is a very interesting process as well. And it's very cool, I guess is the best word that I can think of, to see the actors' interpretations of the different roles, especially in Limbo, because I feel like I didn't give them very clear-cut characters. I think that Fernando was clear-cut, the most clear-cut, I guess, not clear-cut, but the most clear-cut of the characters in that film, because he seemed to me to be the one that knew the most what he wanted. But for our other actors, Eulalia, especially playing Susana, we gave her a character that the character herself doesn't fully understand herself, which I can only imagine as a real challenge for any actor. So to see her kind of give voice and life to that character, it certainly wasn't the easiest character to interpret. So I think that she did an amazing job, and you know, seeing that after the film was finished was delightful, but also very surreal as the writer.
¿Y cómo sabes que no?
Pues porque a ti no te pegan mucho las faldas.
Eres más lista de lo que pensaba.
When we first started working on this, one of the things that was important to me was telling the story from a female perspective, right? We've got 3 characters, 2 of them are men, and 1 of them is a woman. And yes, we could tell the same story 3 different times from each person's perspective, but for me, telling the story from a female perspective, and especially from a multi-dimensional female perspective, is very important. We have so many films in this industry, and especially in Hollywood. Like if you were to go right now onto your computer and start watching trailers for upcoming films, the majority of them are starring a straight white man. And that is the norm in this industry, despite the fact that women are half of the population. We still kind of always default to this straight white guy, and there's no real reason that we need to do that. If anything, I feel like having diverse perspectives is very important, and one of the ways to do that is to show women not just as maybe the stereotypical rom-com female lead, which is what we almost always see with this type of film, but to show a woman who is a real person. She's multidimensional. She's got some really important decisions to make, and she's doing so not just from the perspective of a woman, but from the perspective of her individual character as well. So it was important to me to tell a female perspective, but not just a female perspective, to tell the perspective of one particular woman who is individual, who is unlike what we would typically see in a rom-com or a story about a love triangle, and to kind of get some diversity in storytelling that we don't normally see in the industry in general.